Eb, what's the most efficient way for someone to drop 20 pounds of fat without losing muscle?
It's going to really come down to how they eat, right? It's going to come down to eating and training consistently. You want to train like 4 to 5 days a week, and that has to be like hardcore strength training in terms of getting, say, 2 to 3 movements in every workout. Two of those should be compound, right? We want to get our big movements in because that's going to help us preserve muscle, and that's going to send the signals to our body to preserve muscle. And then on top of that, you've got to clean up the diet, right? So on some level, if we just look at 20 pounds, if we look at 20 pounds, losing that, you have to get yourself into a calorie deficit of probably at least 500 calories a day. That's going to work out to 3,500 calories down a week, right? And you're going to have to stick to that until you lose the weight. That's going to be the smartest, most efficient, and most sustainable way to do it. But somebody who goes into that has to understand this, especially the not losing muscle part, which is really important from a longevity standpoint. It's not going to be easy.
And from like a calorie consumption standpoint, like what types of foods would you prioritize within the calories to make sure that you are, again, like doing your best to maximize either muscle retention or growth and also dropping body fat?
So I think this goes across the board, whether it's trying to build muscle, whether it's trying to lose it or whatever. Essentially, all people should be prioritizing the same types of foods. But the biggest thing we want to prioritize is going to be natural lean protein, right? So every single person, again, this just gets more important if we're trying to lose weight on a deadline while preserving muscle. You want to build your diet around natural proteins like chicken, fish, eggs, beef, whatever you're into from like a protein standpoint, that's the big play, right? The second big thing you want to prioritize after you kind of making sure that you're hitting, and the way I like to think about it too is the goal is 1 gram of protein per pound of goal weight that you want to have for every single day. And that's a little bit high, right? Technically it's 0.8 grams per pound of goal body weight, right? But we want to get to 1 gram of protein per pound of goal body weight, just because it's going to keep you satiated. It's going to help keep you satiated. The next thing we're going to say will help with that too. And then it's going to give you the building blocks to rebuild your muscles, right? Second thing you want to prioritize on that. So we've got our meats. Every meal should have, 4 to 6 ounces of meat, protein, however you're going to get it, or like a protein shake, although that's a little less effective for other reasons in terms of like the macronutrient breakdown and in terms of, getting a complete protein. Second thing you want to prioritize, and this is going to keep you feeling full, which is the trick during a calorie deficit because you're going to be hungry, right? Second thing is fiber, right? Making sure that you're getting upwards of 35 to 50 grams of fiber every single day. That's going to come a lot of times in our leafy grains, in our leafy greens, right? In some of our grains, in a lot of the stuff like we don't really necessarily like to eat, in like our wheat germ and stuff like that. But finding ways to get that fiber in, and one of the biggest things with fiber, so fiber is going to keep you satiated, and most Americans are not getting the fiber that they need on a daily basis, right? If you hit those two marks, and then if you hit those two marks and then you kind of fill in, with carbs, maybe around your training if you need, or you're just working to not eat excess carbs, right? Then you're generally going to wind up where you need to be, right? But you start with those two things and then you kind of build from there. In general, I do not tell people to think too much about their fat consumption, right? A lot of the fats you're going to get on a daily basis they're going to come when you're getting your lean proteins in, right? A lot of those have a little bit of fat in there. And then by the end of the day, you wind up at 50, 60, 70 grams of fat, which to be honest is plenty, right? Biggest things to prioritize too, and this is a very big conversation these days, are natural foods, real foods, single ingredient foods, right? Chicken, fish, eggs, vegetables, fruits, right? Rice. That is all going to be a lot better and be more satiating when you're in that calorie deficit, as compared to ultra processed, right? As compared to, General Mills cereals like Cheerios, Pop Tarts, stuff like that. All of those ultra processed foods they're much easier to consume. And so you're going to wind up eating more of them. And that's a very, very convenient way to wind up outside of your calorie deficit. And that's a very, very convenient way to wind up overeating, and that's the thing that's going to kill you on that journey to losing 20 pounds.
Right. And I think one of the other things that kills progress is people, they're either all or nothing. They're either 100% like on a diet or they're like just off completely. What have you found to be like a realistic percentage, either for yourself or just people in general, to follow like their plan? Like, is it 80-20? Is it 90-10? If they have like a serious goal, like trying to drop fat while preserving muscle.
Yeah, I think in general the rule is 80-20, right? 80% of the time try to eat well, right? 20% of the time you can mess up a little bit, right? I think it goes a little bit beyond that too, because I think what you said, yeah, you're right. People are all or nothing, and then even if they drop to 20 pounds, what happens? You know, very very easily, it's like, okay, I lost the 20 pounds because I went on this diet and I trained really hard, etc. And then as soon as the diet is over, they go back to the way things were, right? Which I think hurts, right? Um, that's why one of the words I used earlier was sustainable in this, and I think it is important that it be sustainable. And I think that's almost less about thinking 80-20 and more about gradually building, right? Kind of get, as you're losing those 20 pounds, you're doing it with kind of habits that you're gradually adding in over and over time, right? That that you can sustain and you can keep up for life, right? There's kind of another way to think about a calorie deficit, and it's a little bit complicated, so I'm going to do my best to simplify it for as best I can. But one other thing I've done with clients here and there is I'll have them track their food for a week. You know, in general, and it's hard because people eat out or whatever. But in general, we all tend to gravitate towards the same foods. You know, I come home every day, right? I almost always, after my workout, I'm going to have a bowl of rice with tuna. You know, and I kind of know what that is, right? Some people, you know, it's like your regular thing is like you have a Pop Tart for breakfast, but we all kind of have our habits, right? And if you track that for a week, right, without even knowing how many calories that is, right, you realize you're eating relatively the same things, right? And then what you can gradually do is you can slowly but surely be like you can cut parts of that out, right? So you can slowly but surely say, okay, this week I'm going to cut out, that Pop Tart, or I'm going to swap that Pop Tart out for, you know, like a protein shake, right? And then all of a sudden you get used to that and you build that sustainably, right? And without knowing it, you've cut out 200 calories a day, you know? So there's a different, I think in addition to thinking of 80-20, like how much am I going to get it right? How much am I going to get it wrong? What we want people to do for the long term of both the moment when they're trying to lose that 20 pounds and for the longevity of, getting their diet to a point where it's sustainable is we want to help them cut out some of those habits and transition to sustainable things that they can eat that make them feel better, right? So that's another way to think about it. I think that's a little bit better than thinking about it just like 80-20. I'm going to stick to my diet 80% of the time and 20% I'm not.
I think it's all about mindset and how you frame things going into some sort of health plan. You brought up sustainability. I think that short term goals can really help build momentum, but it's like, how do you maintain it for the rest of your life? Like, what are some of the common like mindset reframes you think people need to make if they're going to like make this fitness journey count and stick to it?
Um, there's a lot of them, right? I think I'll give you kind of to start one that I like to think of in terms of diet, right? And then one that I like to think of in terms of training. And I think the two things go hand in hand, right? I'll give you three of them. The first one is in terms of diet. I think a lot of it is starting to reframe our overall relationship with food, right? And I think too many of us, and it's awesome because food tastes really good, right? And it can be cathartic for us, and it can be all these things for us, right? And I think one of the things we want to do over time is start to reframe food as less of like a comfort thing and more of like a fuel thing, right? And that doesn't mean we can't enjoy it, right? But it's like what we want to do is think about, what does my body need to get through the day, right? What does my body need so it will feel good? What does my body need so I will move well? And once we understand the impact that food can have on us from that standpoint, I think a lot of times that can help us eat a little bit better, because food, when we're eating the right things for our body, right, it's going to help us feel good from an inflammation standpoint. We're going to feel less sore. We're going to have more energy, right? And I think sometimes leaning into those ideas with food and starting to understand that relationship can help us, instead of viewing food as this comfort thing or this thing we're going to grab every time we sit down to the TV, right? I think that's the biggest thing from a food standpoint. From a training standpoint, I think we need to reframe what we're trying to get out of training. And the biggest problem I see is too many people, and the two things go hand in hand. Is we think we're going to eat comfortably, right? And then on the other side, we're going to go into the gym, we're going to burn that off. And I think what one of the biggest missions I've had at Men's Health over the last couple of years, and I think a lot of trainers are doing their best to push this as well. One of the biggest missions where we've had is trying to help people understand the real reason you're going into the gym and the real reason you're strength training is not to sweat and burn a ton of calories, but it's to build muscle and send the signals to your body that it needs to build muscle and retain the muscle that you have, right? And I think when people do that, then they can be a little less intimidated of the gym, feel a little bit less like they have to walk away from every workout drenched in sweat, and that can alleviate some of the whole I'm going to kill myself in the gym, and allow them to get a little bit more out of it, right? Last thing I think is really important as a reframe is also just like what you're doing throughout the rest of your day, right? And I think one thing we've got to help. One thing that helps is understanding that you've got to be active throughout your day anyway. It'll help you play with your kids, doing chores, stuff like that. All of that is where we're getting our activity and burning most of our calories. And so the more active we are throughout our entire day, the better. Don't think of the gym as that place where you're burning calories, right? Think of life as this vehicle that allows you to burn calories, because you get to move and you get to, take walks and enjoy time with your kids and stuff like that.
Yeah. And you brought up some really good points there, and this idea that you have to kill yourself in the gym in order to see results is not true. Like you said, like you can go in there, get a good workout, enjoy yourself without feeling like you're going to pass out at the end. That being said, at the beginning, we talked about how you really do have to kind of push yourself at the gym if you have this goal of dropping straight body fat without losing muscle. Like, what are some of the principles you think people should follow in the gym specifically that would allow them to make sure that they're pushing themselves at the right pace in order to reach that goal?
The biggest principle is going to be progressive overload, but it's understanding what progressive overload is, because I think we all kind of on some level saw like an Instagram post or read a book or watched something on TV back when we were 10 or 12 years old. So we understand the idea of progressive overload being like, you start at one weight and then a month later you've added more weight, right? But I think what we have to do in the gym, and this is also how we like preserve muscle, when we do push our limits, that sends the signals to our body to retain or to gain muscle. We just have to understand what that looks like. And progressive overload mostly means doing a little bit more than you did last time. That could be literally, I did 10 push-ups today. The next time I go into a workout where I have push-ups, I'm going to do 11. Or it doesn't even have to be an 11th. Maybe I can't do it. Maybe I only did 10 push-ups, but I can try an 11th and lower myself very, very slowly to the ground, right? And I've put in more effort than I did that first time around, right? So I think people need to, especially when you're at the very beginning of a weight loss journey, progressive overload can be this horribly intimidating thing, because you think you have to make a massive amount of progress over the course of 3 weeks, but a little bit of progress is all you have to make, right? So whatever you do, and I'm trying to simplify this as much as I can for people. Whatever you do in the gym, you get to choose your tracking metric, especially if you don't have a trainer. And if you choose that track, maybe that's time spent in the gym, time spent really moving. Maybe it's going to be steps on a treadmill, right? Maybe you're going to choose, and this is kind of the more advanced way that you want to do it. Maybe you want to choose 3 kind of tent pole exercises, and you should make these kind of your classic big exercises, such as like the bench press or a deadlift or a squat, right? And whatever you do in the gym today, the next day you're going to find some way to push a little bit harder, right? And that again, you want to find sustainable ways that you can do that. The most sustainable way that I'll give people, if I can't be there training with them, is something called a rest pause idea. Essentially, let's say I'm doing 3 sets of 10 reps on the squat with 50 pounds on a goblet squat, right? And that maxes me out today. And then I go into the gym and I do 3 sets of 10 reps at 50 pounds on that same goblet squat. And I can't do any more no matter how hard I try, right? I can, after my final set, I can do those 10 reps. I could put the dumbbell down. I can count to 5, take 5 deep breaths, and then I can do another 1 to 2 reps, right? And from a total work done standpoint, I've done 2 more reps, you know? So I think that's the biggest principle that people have to understand. The other principle people have to understand is, and I've talked about it a little bit within this already, is the idea of compound moves, multi-joint moves, right? It's really, really easy for anybody to go in and do dumbbell curls or do triceps kickbacks. And I think or do, sit-ups. And I think we still have this myth that floats around about spot reduction that, if I'm doing all the sit-ups in the world, suddenly the weight is going to melt off of my waist. If I'm doing triceps kickbacks or press downs, the weight is going to magically melt off my arms. That's not how it works, right? If I'm on a weight loss journey and again, I'm trying to preserve muscle, both for the purpose of spurring that weight loss a little bit because these bigger movements are going to burn more calories, and for the purpose of preserving as much muscle and strength as possible, I want to focus on the big exercises that are going to require multiple muscle groups, right? Not coincidentally, those big exercises are going to be the exercises that make you tired the most because they're going to require the most muscle groups, and they're going to have your body moving through space more, and they're going to have you moving more weight. So focus your workouts if you're really pushing for weight loss. Focus your workouts on the big exercises: squats, lunges, deadlifts, bench presses, rows. Any exercise that requires multiple muscle groups and is relatively taxing is the way you want to go.
What are your thoughts on workout splits? Like, do you think people should focus on a particular split when they're going in the gym and they're doing some of these exercises, or do you think they should just do whatever works for them?
I think it varies, and it depends on how much time you can spend in the gym. And that's another thing too. You go back to the conversation we were having a little bit earlier about all or nothing, right? You don't need to be in the gym 7 days a week, right? It's about finding a way to make it sustainable, especially if you want your weight loss to carry through, right? It's about finding a way to make it sustainable, and 9 times out of 10, that's not going to be 7 days a week. I like to start people out on a 3-day a week split. If you have to reduce that to 2, there's still a way you can do it as well. If I'm going with 2 days a week, I'm probably going to have them on a full body split, right? So that then I think if you have people on a full body split, that's a really good, you can get it done on 2 days a week, but we just have to be really efficient and we have to hit all our large movement patterns. And that's most likely going to happen on a 2-day a week split. The more frequency we can get with hitting our key muscle groups, the better, right? Because they'll respond when they've had it, when they've been trained hard and had a chance to recover, right? So if I have 2 days a week, I'm going to go with a full body split. If I can get somebody in the gym for 3 days a week, then I'm going to have them do their upper body exercises, bench press, rows, overhead presses, pull downs or pull ups on one day. I'll have them do lower body on another day. That's going to be lunges, squats, deadlifts, etc. And then I'll have them do a third day that's full body, right? That full body day, we'll do a couple supersets. And then what's happened when we've done that with a 3-day split, right? We've essentially hit our upper body twice. We've hit our upper body twice in the week, and we've hit our lower body twice in the week, right? If I can get you in the gym 4 days a week, I'm going to have you do upper body exercises one day, lower body exercises another day, and then we'll repeat that. So we'll go upper, lower, upper, lower. The more days you can commit to the gym, the more you can start to specialize your split. But I think it really is based on what you want to do first is commit to how many days you can go to the gym, and then you build your split from that.
I would love to know your thoughts on, let's just say you weighed 30 pounds heavier than you do now, and you have 90 days to transform your body. like where would you start with yourself? What would be like your quick start guide to get started so that you could effectively reach your goal?
Are we assuming that that I'm relative, like I have my same gym background, or am I starting from ground zero?
Let's just say you have somewhat of a gym background. Let's say you're in between ground zero and being the fitness director at Men's Health.
My step one again is figure out what I can commit to time wise to making this happen, right? Because again, it starts there, right? If I can, and it's deciding like what's sustainable. So I think that's 3 or 4 days a week, right? From there, I can then build my training split. It's an understanding how many days a week I can commit and how long I can commit to the gym, right? From there, I build my training split. And again, I'm focusing on those multi joint moves, right? Making sure I'm bench pressing, doing my push ups, doing my rows, doing my deadlifts, doing my squats and lunges, right? If I do those things in the gym from a strength standpoint, I'm starting to build the muscle that I need under my structure, right? So that's step one, is starting to understand the workout element of things, right? Step two is going to be how I tweak my diet. And I would do this in levels, and I would do this slowly, right? And I think this is like a 5 step process. Again, I have to start tracking, right? Um, Tracking is one of the most humbling things for anybody, because in general, we all think we eat less and then we find out we eat more. But I have to start tracking so that I understand a little bit about how many calories I'm taking in a day, right? And a little bit about where those foods are coming from, right? Um, so I'm going to spend about a week tracking, right? From there, I'm going to start to make almost like a schedule of dietary tweaks. And I don't want to make it all at once, to your point about all or nothing, right? Because if I make it all at once, it's going to be unsustainable and it's going to drive me insane, right? So I'm going to essentially spend 3 to 4 day blocks adding different pieces within my tolerance. And I've got to kind of check in with myself during that process, right? Like if I'm struggling to drink, one of the best things people can do, right? One of the first things you can do is cut out extraneous liquids, right? Things that aren't water. You know, am I drinking a lot of juice? Am I drinking a lot of like, frappuccinos from Starbucks, right? All of that is really easy, stealthy calories that wind up in our diet, you know? So one of the first things I do with clients when we get to that diet point is we spend a week, and obviously I have 90 days, so I'm going to shrink these windows, right? But I spend a week. It's like, okay, can we do whatever you want in your diet? But all I want you to do during this week is drink water. That's the only thing I'm changing. And once we get that down, we can move on to the next thing, right? Um, so it's like I would start with that. I would start by drinking water only for the first 3 to 4 days, right? And then I'll layer on a little bit, right? Can I switch out my breakfast cereal for, a protein shake, right? Or for like 3 scrambled eggs, you know? That gets me, I'm likely, if I was having a whole ton for my breakfast, right? I'm suddenly having, suddenly a little bit cleaner for my first meal, and I'm starting with more protein, right? What are some of the other adjustments I can make throughout my day, right? Can I make sure that I'm having like a handful of greens with my dinner, right? Instead of having, a bowl of rice, right? Or a bowl, or instead of having dessert, right? I try to make those tweaks and I gradually add on to those, right? And again, like once I understand what my diet looks like, I can gradually make those tweaks, right? But in general, the levels of tweaks I think about are: one, drinking water first, right? Two, making sure I'm getting my protein in, right? Three, trying to add fiber wherever possible, right? And then four, trying to cut out more and more and more of the ultra processed foods that I might have in my diet. And if I do those things over the course of 90 days, right, I'm going to gradually wind up in the calorie deficit that I need to be. And also I'm going to have more fuel for my body, right? The third window of things I'm doing in order to lose all that weight in 90 days is I'm trying to add in NEAT. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, non-exercise, activity thermogenesis. I'm trying to find different pockets where I can do that, right? Like, and they probably start with coming home from work and taking a walk, right? When I'm at lunch at the office, can I take a walk? Just little things like that. Can I play with my kids more? Because honestly, playing with your kids is one of the most exhausting things in the world. And I don't even have kids, right? Um, but trying to find as many pockets and make that as much a part of my routine as possible, all of that like sets me up, and all of that is also priming me for the fourth thing, which is, can I get more activity outside of my workout that challenges my body in other ways, right? So the more off balance we can keep our bodies in terms of other activities like basketball, you know what I mean, like going for playing backyard football with like the guys or something like that, like all of that stuff. um One, it's really good for your body in terms of challenging you in multiple planes, multiple directions, multiple speeds. Two, it burns a lot of calories, right? And three, when we start to mix up those other activities, right, our body, one of the things that happens in the gym, and one of the reasons we have to challenge ourselves with weight and load and stuff like that, is because our body gets more efficient at those movement patterns that we replicate, right? When you're out playing basketball for the first time in 6 months, you ever notice like you get back home and you feel like horrible? Reason you feel horrible is because your body was very, very inefficient at handling those movements, right? So trying to mix up as many movements and take on different activities that we might not like, maybe it's going hiking with like your girlfriend or something like that, right? All those, adding in those activities that you were inefficient at, and gradually we're going to become better at them as we get more active too, but also we're going to like lose weight. So I think those are the levels of things I would try to do. I want to start with the things that are going to carry through as like these long-term habits, right? Which is, again, how much can I commit to in the gym, getting the workout done? How can I gradually and slowly alter my diet as I've tracked? How can I get in regular walks, right? Because again, all those things are sustainable, right? And then as I get better near the end of that 90-day window, I'm adding in these things that are a little harder, a little less sustainable so that I can push. But one, I'm pushing on a body that suddenly over the first 45 to 60 days of my journey has been built up and ready for this, which is going to prevent me from, getting random injuries and stuff like that too, right? And two, I'm using that stuff to finish things off. And I think that's the most sustainable way. And that's the best way to approach a weight loss journey on a timetable.
I really appreciate like your in-depth explanation on how you would do that, and also the nuance and the reality of what it actually takes so that people can sustain it. Um, I would love to hear, like, personally, like, what are 5 fitness hacks that you swear by that most people may not have ever heard of?
I think some of the biggest things that I think about are one, um, unilateral exercises, right? I think doing more, again, like you get to the thing that I just mentioned earlier about finding like the body when it has to do new things is inefficient, right? So when we do, again, we're used to our mentally, we're very often used to ideas like push-ups, right? And sit-ups and these kind of symmetrical movements. When we challenge our body asymmetrically, one, that's like how life happens, right? And two, it's like that it's just something our body needs. It's really good for our core. So I think one, like unilateral training. I don't squat, for example. I only do lunges and split squats. Some people, the CrossFitters, will say that's because I am horrible at squatting. It's mostly because like those unilateral positions are really athletic. So that's thing one. Other hacks I really like. I'm very big into, you don't have to do. I don't do cardio per se, right? Cardio is boring. Okay, getting on the treadmill, doing anything repeatedly for a half hour is very boring, right? What I prefer to do is being athletic, right? So like going out, like jumping rope. Pick a line, right? Pick a line. Literally, like set your timer for say 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. Do this for like 10 minutes, and just jump back and forth over that line, right? These are things that make it all beats to me like walking on a treadmill or rowing for a half hour or getting on a ski erg for a half hour. And the one of the bonus things that comes with that is, instead of just kind of working your aerobic system, because obviously there's a lot of talk of like zone 2 cardio, right? Instead of just working your aerobic system, you're also building athleticism, you're getting explosive, you're doing something that I think people forget about in the gym, which is you're kind of accelerating and decelerating certain muscles. Our muscles need that stimulus, and they not just to grow, but to like bulletproof themselves against injury. And our bodies are meant to do that too. As great as walking is, like our bodies are meant to do more than walk, right? So that's another thing. The other biggest thing I'm into is less is more, right? Um, in terms of reps, I think a lot of people think you have to do 10 to 12 reps of, any exercise and feel the burn. And I don't chase it anymore. What I focus on, the biggest thing I focus on is training heavy, but within reason. So I don't do 1 rep maxes, but I'm very big into that 5 to 7 rep range. It's sustainable, right? It lets you go heavy enough. Um, and it's a little bit more fun than trying to sit there and get 10 to 12 reps. I'll give you actually one more too. One of the biggest things I think is important that I think everybody forgets is when you get a really good contraction on any exercise, right? Think about flexing that muscle. Okay. So when I'm doing a biceps curl and I get to the top of it, flex your biceps. When we're doing a sit up, think about squeezing your abs at the very top of a sit up, right? When I'm doing a bench press, think about squeezing my chest. Whatever muscle you are trying to train, like that you're doing that exercise for, when you get to that period where you're like kind of at like peak contraction, you can feel your body working. Squeeze that muscle. Also, last thing, I'll give you one more. When you get to a point in an exercise where it's horrible and you don't want to, like there's the bottom of the squat, right? The bottom of a bench press where our chest is nice and stretched out, right? Um, those moments, the bottom of a pull up, right? Anytime you're in those moments and you don't want to be in those moments, this isn't really a fitness hack because it doesn't make anything easier. It's actually a fitness reverse hack because it makes everything harder, but so much better for you. But when you get to those moments, count to 2 in your head before you leave that moment, because that moment very often is the position where the muscle is the most stretched out. And 1, it's making it more resilient. And 2, it's going to allow you to build muscle with lighter weights too, because you're in that stretch position. And that's what science is telling us is the best place for building muscle.
I feel like so many people they think that they're doing everything right. They're reading things like Men's Health, consuming your content, listening to podcasts like this. Like I'm doing all the things, but I still look the same. Like, what do you think's typically going wrong there?
It's hard because they probably are. I think the thing that happens most often is people aren't quite going hard enough. They think they're doing all the right things because they're following the reps and the sets and this and that and the other thing, right? But one of the things that isn't really understood or appreciated enough is this principle called RIR, reps in reserve, right? And basically, it's just without making it too complicated. The thing that we have to do is we have to choose weights that are hard enough, right? That when we're doing an exercise, the last rep is tough, right? And the easiest way to see this is going to be in rep speed, right? If I'm doing, say, a set of curls or a set of push-ups, and the first rep is that I drive. When my body is nice and fresh, it's going to take me, say, a second to drive up from the bottom of that push-up. As it tires over the course of a set, it should take me a little bit longer because my muscles are fatiguing to get up from the push-up, right? Um, so if I can do say 20 push-ups and the first rep I get up in 1 second and the second rep I get to the top position in 1 second as well, then I have more push-ups I can do, right? So I need to push that set a little bit harder, or I need to add weight or something. I need to make the exercise a little bit more challenging. So I think a lot of people, I think the tendency is they see 3 reps of 10 in an issue of Men's Health or in one of my Instagram posts, right? Or in a video that they're watching, and they do the 3 reps of 10, or they do the 3 sets of 10 reps, but they didn't go hard enough. And then they're wondering why they aren't getting the results. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just making sure that you're pushing yourself, and that if it does say 3 sets of 10, that by the 10th rep of each of those sets, you're working with the weight where you kind of sort of had a little bit of doubt that you could get the rep done, because that's a very good sign that you were using the right weight. I think that's one thing. And I think the other thing is, and I'll go back to what I was saying at the start, tracking, right? I think very often it's very convenient for us to kind of guesstimate what we're eating, and we think we're eating healthy, or we think we're eating clean. And very often we're 300 or 400 or sometimes 500 calories over, in a meal or in this or that, the other thing, right? It's also very convenient too. And this is where 80/20 kind of fails us, right? Because 80% of the time you think you're eating clean, but 20% of the time you're having the whole pizza, right? And that's just, that's not going. So 80% of the time you're working to get into this calorie deficit. And then 20% of the time, instead of just cheating a little bit because you view that as like the 20% where you can do whatever you want, you completely sabotage your 80%, right? So I think when people track throughout the course of their week, they'll be able to see those differences, and then they start to have that awareness for themselves of where they've got to be a little bit more disciplined, and maybe that even is during that 20%.
So staying on the same theme of like weight loss, dropping fat without losing muscle, like how could somebody get like sub 15% without like wrecking their hormones or feeling like their hormones are wrecked?
To be honest, everything we've talked about in this podcast already, right? Because I think that the biggest thing in the time when you're going to feel horrible and also torpedo your hormones is when you try to do too much too soon, right? Because that's when one, because then all of a sudden your body's like, I don't have any nutrients in myself at all, right? So what do I do, right? Or you're training too hard, and then your body can't, your body can't properly recover, right? So I think it is. I think the more sustainably and slowly you build to it, right, the better. And one of the tricks with that is essentially you have to have a plan and you have to stick to that plan for a week or 2 weeks, right? And then you can kind of reevaluate and again see where you can make diet changes and stuff like that. But I think the biggest thing is just like not doing too much too fast. And that's also where the idea of a whole ton of cardio and the idea of losing weight based letting our activity levels drive weight loss as opposed to letting our diet drive weight loss, that's where that fails us, right? Because too often people think, okay, I'm going to go on my weight loss journey, so therefore I have to start running for 2 hours a day or something like that, right? And all of that activity, right, that is kind of what messes with our recovery levels, that leads to like fatigue. That's what messes with our hormones, right? Because we can't, if you take your body to those extremes, and the same thing we can do with diet too, where we suddenly go from like say 3,000 calories a day all the way down to 1,200, right? We've taken our body to this extreme place, and so our hormones haven't had a chance to properly adjust. So it is about you have to do this sustainably, and you have to take your time, right?
Yeah, and would you say that that's like the big killer of progress that a lot of people miss is these extreme measures they take when it comes to transforming their body?
Oh yeah, exactly. And it's hard too because I understand. And one of the trickiest things as a trainer too is taking that moment, because anybody who has to lose weight, right? You want them to be excited about the journey, and when they're in that excitement, they're trying to do all those things. It's a very tricky balance because I don't want to necessarily pull you back, right? But what I do want to help you do is schedule it out. That way we can avoid those crashes, right? Because that's what happens. Because then one of two things happens if you try to do too much. If you try to drop your calories off a cliff and amp your activity levels all at the same time, and suddenly you're running and you're training and you're doing all those things, even if the hormones don't crash, you're also inviting a lot of injury risk, right? Because your body isn't ready for this massive dose of activity combined with this caloric drop. And so even if your hormones are fine, you're setting yourself up for injury because you haven't, taken enough time. And I think injuries, and then also I think the three biggest killers of weight loss journeys are injuries, hormone and fatigue levels, right? And very often we wind up talking too much about, this is a separate discussion, but we wind up talking too much about hormones like cortisol and stuff like that, and how those like are suddenly like responsible for like our weight gain, this and that and the other thing. But that's a separate discussion. But I think injuries, hormone levels, and also like if you think about just sustainability over the course of your life holistically, suddenly your family is like, where'd this guy go? He's running all the time and I don't see daddy anymore, right? Is again trying to make it fit in with your life. And I think those are the three biggest killers of any weight loss journey.
I'm curious, like, what are some lies, I guess, you believed early on in your fitness journey that you held back, that held you back, that you've changed your mind on?
They're funny enough. I think they're lies that I still sometimes fight, right? And it's a very tricky balance, I think, for a lot of us in the gym, because because that that kind of that excitement and push to always work hard is a very very good thing, but it sometimes needs to be reined in. I think the biggest lie that I struggled with was and still is the idea that a 0 day is bad, right? A 0 day being, like, I come from hashtag no days off, right? Always got to do something, always got to be pushing, right? And always got to be training heavy, always got to be training my hardest. And what happens then is, yes, I can still get stronger and I can still get my lifts done and stuff like that. But the times where, in order for the relationship between training and recovery is key, because it's when I'm not training that my body tissues are adapting to the workout that I put in. And that adaptation, in theory, is what I was training for, whether that is more muscle or more speed or more strength. If I don't give my body adequate rest time, then I'm never going to be able to really, really capitalize on my training, right? So the biggest thing for me was not training, being willing to take like a day where I wasn't killing myself in some regard. For a lot of years, I thought I could, I thought I could train 7 days a week, and as long as I was doing something different, right? As long as I wasn't training legs 7 days a week, I would be okay because my legs could recover, quote unquote, when I was doing arms, or if I was, going for like a 4 mile run or something like that, my legs would be recovering because they were recovering. I thought that was good enough, right? And what I've gradually realized is that my body really needs like a full rest day sometimes, like a full or a day where I'm just taking a walk, and that can be okay. And when I do that, I get a lot more results. So I would say that was the biggest thing. The other big misconception I have for a long time is that I'm training really hard, I'm sweating, and sweat somehow equals cardio, right? Sweat somehow equals training my aerobic system. And it wasn't until probably like 5 or 6 years ago that I really started to understand that that's not the case, right? I need to train my aerobic system actively. And so, I do that with cardio, and I do that on 3 levels. Like I'll get like interval training. So I'm training like my mid-level cardio system, training a little bit more zone 4, zone 5. I'll get some zone 2, some zone 1, zone 2 work in, but I try to mix that up a little bit. And then the last thing I think, the last misconception I had for a long time was that doing all these muscle exercises was enough, right? One of the biggest things that I think we forget, I can do the bench presses and squats and deadlifts. And I'm like, I'm getting stronger, right? So I'm good. I'm good in the long run, right? But one of the things that's come out research wise over the last 3 or 4 years is just the need for us to move explosively and powerfully, and that is the jumps, sprints, taking a lighter weight and lifting it with speed, right? All of that is really key to our longevity, and I think that's the biggest thing that held me back for a long time too. Because I was always doing these slow, heavy lifts, and so I was training my muscles to move slowly, which is great, right? Because they can move a lot of weight slowly. But over time, I gradually lost some of the power response that I needed. And now, one, I need to work on getting that back. But two, we as a society need to build that in, because power is actually the thing that diminishes when we age first. Like we can continue to get stronger and build muscle into our 40s, 50s, 60s, but we have to maintain our power, just because we need that to prevent falls, and we need that so we can move quickly and efficiently throughout life.
What's been like either one or two interviews that you've done where you've interviewed, whether it's celebrities, fitness experts, any people for Men's Health that has really like shaped you, either in your fitness career or just who you are as a person?
Easiest one I'll give you is a couple years ago. I want to say 3 years ago. I did a cover with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Nice.
Yeah. Also like a dream. I remember we were on the Preacher Curl. I got to train with him as part of this cover story. We're on the Preacher Curl.
In Venice?
Yeah, Venice Beach.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I like didn't he like I didn't shower for like 3 days, right? So we're on the preacher curl. We're on the preacher curl. I'm doing reps, right? And he's like, he's like, feel the muscle like kind of rolling up and rolling down. So you want to feel on your biceps. He touched my biceps, right? And I remember being like, Arnold Schwarzenegger is touching my biceps. This is the Terminator touching my bicep. Life complete. But definitely just like kind of like a bucket list. Okay, I'm done with life and happy experience. But I think more than that too. One of the interesting things, because we did all machines that day. He's 70, late 70s these days, right? So it wasn't training like heavy, but he was training on machines. And he asked me one question that I thought about a lot at the time. And he's like, "Why are you not going all the way down, letting the weight stack hit the bottom?" And I was like, "Because constant tension, that's why, because I'm feeling the burn, feeling the contraction." He's like, use a full range of motion, you know. And I never forgot that, and it's kind of present in all my workouts. I always go that last little centimeter so that the weight stack goes all the way down, and then I reverse the energy quickly, right? But so that it affected my training, and it was just like a dream come true because I Arnold Schwarzenegger was the first movie I ever saw. Was, I think, Terminator 2, and was the reason I went to the gym in the first place. It's the reason I wear black shirts, because I'm pretty sure what Terminator wore it. I'll give you one more. The cover I did a different cover story on Simu Liu. For it was right before the Shang-Chi movie, the Marvel movie, and it was during COVID. He and I had a really long conversation, but one of the things for me is, like, as an Asian man, right? It took me a while to kind of feel comfortable being strong, get into the gym, and there were a couple things, like, I've always just been a little bit less, I guess, comfortable about my heritage. It took me a while to grow into, and listening to his experience, we had a lot of common experience that I remember. We were both fans of, like, the Power Rangers, and both fans of the Green Ranger in particular, right? um, and there's like an Asian connection to that. And so some of that, just conversing with him and talking to somebody who had, we both almost changed our name. Like, I remember being in high school, and like I was trying to get people to not call me my long name Ebenezer, because I thought that was the reason like kids didn't like me, right? And Simu went through a similar situation, right? Where he didn't change his name, but he thought about it. I think he thought about calling himself Steve, right? And just those little things, like realizing like I'm not the only one who went through certain things, was both comforting and like a reminder that it pays in very useful ways to society to for us to be open and share like our stories with other people.
Well, thanks for sharing those stories, man. I'm glad that those two interviews have really inspired you and helped shape who you are. Ed, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Um, if people want to learn about you and all things men's health, where's the best place to do that right now?
Best place is obviously my Instagram, Ebenezer Samuel 23 is a really good starting point. The other thing that we have right now, and a really good way to get into workouts if people aren't sure how to start, sign up for the Men's Health Muscle newsletter. That's my newsletter at Men's Health. So I drop a lot of wisdom on, like, just my deep cuts on fitness, in addition to giving people really, really good starter kit workouts that they can do at the gym or at home. So I'd say those are the best two places.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you once again for coming on the podcast. I think the audience can get a lot of value out of this.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.